and that's fair enough. I think that we can debate about the Pakistani men angle. There's a big debate about the ethnicity factor, as you know. But just one last point on the Alexis J report.
The vast majority
were
British Pakistani.
Can I finish a sentence?
Well, they were.
That's not true.
In
those specific towns, yes, but as a phenomenon in the UK.
What do you mean it's not true?
As a national phenomenon, the Home Office... Can I finish a sentence, Piers, or are we going to get through this interview?
Sure.
Every time I start a sentence, you interrupt me.
Go on.
The Home Office, under a Conservative government in 2020, put out a report, not sure if you've seen it, got a lot of coverage, saying that the majority of men in grooming gangs, which is not a great phrase, are white men under the age of 30. That was the survey data that they found. They said we need more research. It's not a hard and fast result. We don't have enough ethnicity data. Do you know a lot of police forces, Piers, 30, 40, 50% of victims and perpetrators, they just don't register the ethnicity.
How many white men? How many white men? Okay. How many white men?
That's not to say specific gangs in Rotherham and Rochdale and Telford were brown.
Okay. So let's just focus
But Piers, here's what bothers me. And you asked me about Elon Musk.
Sorry,
I didn't get a chance to get to that because you cut me off.
I'm allowed to respond to what you just said. Because the reality is what you're doing is you're massively distorting. You're massively distorting the story, aren't you?
No, you are. I started telling you about Alexis J. You jumped in with your gotcha about Rotherham. Have you read the 20 recommendations of Alexis J's report? Can you tell your viewers what the 20 recommendations are?
It's not a gotcha.
How many times is Rotherham mentioned in the report? It is. Have you read the 468-page report?
Mehdi, when I went on your show recently, I let you ask me all sorts of questions because it was your show. Okay, I'm asking.
And I let you answer them. You ever let me finish a sentence?
I have.
You ever let me finish a sentence?
You keep saying things which I want to challenge.
You
keep saying things I want to challenge.
Yeah, so let me say them, and then you challenge them. So let me just say them, and I promise, I say them, and then you challenge me.
Let me ask you a question.
I'll say them really fast. I speak really fast. Let me just say them. Alexis J says no need for a new inquiry because her 20 recommendations,
I don't agree with her.
You don't know what they are, haven't been implemented yet.
I know.
But that's fine. I do agree with her. David Greenwood, who was this lawyer for the victims in Rotherham. You mentioned Rotherham as a gotcha, I think. David Greenwood, who was a lawyer in Rotherham of the girls. That's my opinion. I have a right to opinion. David Greenwood, the lawyer in Rotherham, of the dozens of girls, he's the guy who represented the girls in Rotherham. He says, I don't think we should have another inquiry. There's too many inquiries. We need action. We need to get the recommendations done. Another inquiry, he says, would be a distraction. Now, that's not a gotcha on my end either. Maybe we should have another action inquiry. I don't feel that strongly about it. I'm just telling you, Piers, for your viewers who are following Elon Musk's nonsense, a man who knows nothing about this stuff, that David Greenwood, a lawyer involved in this, and Alexis J, who did an inquiry in Rotherham and then did a national inquiry, says we shouldn't have another inquiry.
Yeah, and I'm making the point that in her national inquiry, she mentioned...
You and I are not experts.
I'm making the point, in her national inquiry, she mentioned Rotherham once, and there, to me, is the problem. But the other problem...
And in her Rotherham inquiry, she covered it in detail.
Mehdi,
she also said, don't make a link between Pakistani men and this problem, because white men also involved in grooming gangs.
Rape gang scandal in the 50 towns and villages involved in this rape gang scandal. Tell me this. You've just tried to suggest that more white men were doing it than British Pakistani men. Bit of a surprise.
The Home Office
bit of a surprise, I would think, to everyone you've just named.
That's the Home Office report.
Who've done the report. Okay, so how many white men involved in this rape gang scandal?
That's the Home Office research, Piers. Facts don't care about your feelings.
Hang on. How many white men have been taken to court, charged and/or convicted of raping these white girls in these 50 towns and villages? Just for the record.
Okay. All right, I don't have the full numbers, but let me give you some examples. In 2023 in Glasgow,
what
there were
percentage?
7 years of child sex crimes prosecuted. Piers, we don't have the percentages. That's the whole point.
We know that the very vast majority are actually British Pakistanis.
So hold on.
You're trying to deflect it into thinking it's somehow white men doing all this.
Oh, my God. So in Glasgow, there were white men. So 11 people abused 3 children, one of them in a nappy diaper.
I'm not talking about Glasgow.
You're not talking about that, nor is Elon Musk. In the West Midlands, a decade of child sex crimes. 21 white people abused 7 children, all of them under the age of 12.
Right.
In Cornwall, in 2010,
these
3
aren't
years
the
of sex
scandal
crimes.
we're
You're
talking
going to cut me off when
about,
I talk about sex crime. 6 men. Well, I'll get to that in a moment. 6 men abused 30 girls, the youngest of whom was 5 years old. And you've just made my point for me. These are the scandals we're not talking about. Why? Why are we defining child sex crimes and grooming gangs by race, unless you're a racist or trying to make political hay out of this? I care about the victims of all crimes. I don't give a damn whether the perpetrator was brown, black, white, blue, or yellow. I think we should support the victims of those crimes. And if you're only obsessed with the perpetrators, as Elon Musk is, as Robert Jenrick is, then you don't actually care about these girls. That's what Alexis J said.
The argument, as you know, from those who do want a big further inquiry is that actually it was a very specific section of the community, a very specific section of the Muslim community. And it was British Pakistani men who, they believe, were operating under some warped cultural thing, which they felt entitled them to behave this way.
That's not proven, right? That's what we need. That's what we need. Obviously, more studying on, more research on. I agree with that, because these guys in places like Rochdale, Rotherham, were British Pakistani men overwhelmingly in those cases.
Yes.
But it's very interesting that you pick a sample and then say, these are the towns we're talking about, they're all brown. Well, why can't we talk about Cornwall or Glasgow or the West Midlands? I'm saying this is a phenomenon that happens nationwide. There are multiple, Piers, surely you'd accept, there are multiple factors. There are experts on child sex abuse who you should invite on the show, I'm not one, who will tell you there are multiple factors that cause this stuff. I mean, this happens in every country in the world. In these towns, clearly there were a lot of things going on. We know about police corruption. We should be talking about police corruption in places like Rotherham, where the police knew what was going on. And there are Exactly, and there are allegations of like money and drugs going between the perpetrators and the police.
All sickening,
These girls were treated badly, not just because they were white. Not just because they were white, Piers. Let's talk about the class issue. Because they were seen as worthless. They were seen as poor, working class, not having any value or credibility. So there's a lot of things to talk about here. And yes, we can talk about culture, but you know what? It's interesting you bring religion in. Religion is the most absurd thing of all. Do you think Islam sanctions any of this? These people were plying girls with alcohol and drugs. Last time I checked, alcohol is forbidden in Islam. Even an ignorant person knows that. So any idea that this has anything to do with religion is absolutely absurd and laughable. And again, we don't define white people crimes by Christianity or Judaism. We don't talk about Hindu bankers or Jewish carjackers. I'm not sure why we're bringing religion into this. It's absolutely absurd. And last point on the victims, Piers, I just want to say this, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this point. The victims were overwhelmingly white, right? But they weren't only white. There's this new thing going on that these brown men decided to target white girls because seen as, outside the community and fair game. Not true. If you read Alexis Jay's report on Rotherham, then you'll see that she points out that there were a lot of young Asian girls who were also abused by these men, but who didn't come forward because of, quote unquote, the shame in their community, their parents saying they'll never get married. So there are actually a lot going on here that we've just glossed over. And Elon Musk coming in with his disinformation, his racism, his Islamophobia, championing Tommy Robinson. Surely you would condemn the championing of an Islamophobic, violent bigot like Robinson.
I have done.
And lying that he's in prison because he uncovered this. Robinson had nothing to do with this. In fact,
I literally have been doing that for the last week.
You know, Piers, that good. And Piers, you know that Tommy Robinson almost jeopardized a trial against a bunch of brown guys in Huddersfield.
Twice.
With his contempt of court antics.
Twice. He nearly wrecked 2 trials.
He's not a champion of the victims of gangs.
No, he's not. What do you say? I'm genuinely curious what you think of this. You know, I said on X yesterday that Tommy Robinson is, to me, is the embodiment of an Islamophobe. He's Islamophobic. And there's plenty of examples of where his rhetoric, I think, stacks that up. To which a lot of people, including Gad Saad, who's coming after you, say there's no such thing as Islamophobia. That's the argument that they come up with, which is there is no such thing as Islamophobia, that you're allowed to be as critical as you want of Islam without being accused of being an Islamophobe. What do you say to that?
Can you imagine if I came on your show and said there's no such thing as anti-Semitism, you should be able to be as critical of Judaism as you want? That's an absurd position to state. It's a de facto bigoted position. People say nonsense stuff. You've heard it all, Piers. Oh, it can't be a phobia. That's an irrational fear. That's not what it's like. Well, we have homophobia. We don't say we don't really use it. Am I a fan of the term Islamophobia? No, but anti-Semitism, homophobia, Islamophobia, all these are made up words to try and describe very real phenomenon, which is anti-Muslim bigotry, hate, discrimination, whatever you want to call it, right? The idea, look at Elon Musk, for example. He's now posting about Islamophobia being fiction. This guy who once pretended to be a liberal has gone full hard far right. He's backing a party in Germany, Piers, which is aligned with neo-Nazis who've said outrageous things about Muslims and immigrants and minorities. The German intelligence community believes it's an extremist party. The German courts believe it's an extremist party. Musk is writing articles in German backing them. So this is where we are right now, where the normalization of bigotry and hate against minorities continues apace. And I think, Donald Trump winning is great to fight the woke. It's actually very worrying. We have a global far right. We have Orban. We have Trump. We have in the UK now, I was going to say Farage, but actually it's Tommy Robinson, apparently, that Elon Musk favours, who are being propped up. And they take very, very disturbing views of all this. And Piers, I just want to say this. People think, oh, Islamophobia blown out of proportion, exaggerated by Muslims. Let me just tell you this. In New Zealand, in Christchurch, you remember the 2 mosque attacks in the last Trump presidency when a far-right attacker in New Zealand went and killed more than 50 Muslims as they prayed. Do you know what he had written on his ammunition, on his bullets? He had 4 Rotherham written on his bullets. right? That is what happens when you politicize scandals, politicize controversies, turn very real problems into, pawns in your political game, into weapons to attack minorities. What happens is extremists then jump on that. That's what Keir Starmer was talking about. There is a far-right bandwagon. In Rotherham, an 81-year-old grandfather, Piers, in 2015, was beaten to death by a gang who shouted "groomer" at him. Right? So I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about this stuff. I'm on your show talking about it. I'm just saying how we talk about it is so important.
Is there also, okay, fair enough. Listen, fair enough. Is there also a problem, as the likes of Tommy Robinson have been screaming about now for a long period of time, albeit in my estimation purely for his own self-gain, but is there also a genuine problem in the way that Muslims in Britain who've come into the country have assimilated into communities? We have as many Muslims in Britain, I think, as America has, even though they're 5 times the size. Are there legitimate concerns that you might have about the way Muslims have assimilated or not? Is it fair to even ask the question?
Of course it's fair to ask the question, and I've asked the question myself. I've written about multiculturalism and integration and all of these issues for over 20 years, back when I was in the UK for The Guardian, for The New Statesman. Again, it's how you do it, right? It's not my problem with The Telegraph and parts of The Times and, of course, the Daily Mail and the Daily Express is they do it in a jingoistic, belligerent, one-sided manner. I just gave you the example earlier. We talk about rape gangs. Let's talk about rape gangs. You only talk about Pakistani men. Why aren't you talking about the people in Cornwall or the West Midlands or Glasgow? That becomes a problem. I want us to be able to talk about this in a way that is fair and not discriminatory and not tropes about, brown men are coming here to rape our daughters. That kind of stuff, Piers, I think you would agree is not helpful. Are there issues with integration in places like in some northern towns? Yes. By the way, integration is a two-way street. There's been a lot of white flight from some of those areas. There's been a lot of issues with white working class communities, as you know, with those areas, with deindustrialization, with globalization. There's a lot to get through here. It's not an easy topic. And if we're going to make sweeping generalizations about Pakistani men, well, the mayor of London, just elected for a 3rd time, is the child of Pakistani immigrants. Why are we not talking about the success story that is the UK, which has a Muslim man as the first mayor of a major European city? Or in Scotland, where they elected a Muslim man to be the first Muslim British Pakistani descent, Hamza Yusuf, who was last year the first Muslim leader of a Western nation, right? There have been huge success stories that we don't talk about.
Mehdi, Hasan, good to talk to you. As always, thank you very much.